talking about aspects of love and referring to this book of yours, Unconditional Love Is, Appreciating Aspects of Life. And in this book you describe 63 universal qualities of love that we all share. And what I'd really like to do with you is to look at some of these qualities and just go a little bit deeper into why it is that they're aspects of unconditional love. Because some of them very obviously are aspects of love, and one or two of them, for example this one, freedom, didn't really come to mind immediately as being an aspect of love, and perhaps you can just go into it a bit more deeply with us so that we're really clear about why it is. As a matter of fact, this morning I was thinking about these, and it occurred to me that really just about all of these qualities have love within them as a kind of an absolute aspect of the different qualities, so that the more freedom there is, the more peace, the more harmony, the more sincerity, the more love there is in all of these different qualities. And perhaps if you take them to their absolute value, what's there in fact is love. So you know, it did become, after thinking about that, it did become a bit clearer how all of these qualities are facets of love, or certainly have love within them. But freedom, for example, it's not immediately obvious to me how in my practical day-to-day life freedom would be an aspect of love. So let's just see what you said about it. So within each of these qualities, you've written about them, you've written a single page about them, about 3 paragraphs usually, and let's just see what it is you've said. Freedom is our eternal birthright. Each of us has within us the limitless potential to be whatever we choose. No person, place, condition or thing can ever take it away. We can only give it away of our own volition. Yet we must first acknowledge our freedom to make it real in our world. To experience genuine freedom, we must give freedom. We can no longer expect others to do our will, nor can we continue to control or manipulate another. Instead, we can model the inner experience of freedom and radiate this for all to know. When we free ourselves of self-imposed limiting beliefs, we unlock our potential and become our dreams. Unconditional love is freedom. Freely loving ourselves, those around us, and the rest of our world allows us to express our true selves in the noblest way. So there are perhaps there are a few different elements of this we can perhaps look at. I mean, freedom is our eternal birthright. I mean, that's in the sense that we all have free will to do whatever we choose, isn't it? I mean, we are essentially free at birth.
And what I would actually add to that, to kind of expand upon it, from our previous discussion too, or earlier discussion, is that the point of power is to realize that we have our thoughts and feelings, our own innate thoughts, our own innate feelings, with our relationship to life. Where it may not be so obvious, obviously as a child, we may not be fully cognizant. In fact, there are many of us as adults don't become cognizant of our ability to think and our ability to feel. That essence of freedom comes from our ability to make choices with the types of thoughts and feelings we have. Now, of course, as children, we're conditioned and influenced quite heavily upon all the outer suggestions, generation upon generation passing along belief systems, traditions, rituals, ideas, concepts, hopes, dreams, failures, griefs. We are conditioned by everything. Yet the essence is ever present. The essence of our true freedom is ever present. The essence, that ability, the free will, if you would like to qualify it as our ability to make choices in life. and to realize that our thoughts and feelings do create our physical reality. The way we think, the way we feel, eventually becomes our physical manifestation, our experiences. And the more we can change our perspectives, or alter our perspectives, or take our perspectives higher, more loving, more free, with greater freedom, you know, the less we constrict ourselves. All of these things lead back to the essence of our true nature, which is freedom. We are free to hear, to create as our heart desires. The challenge we, of course, encounter as humans upon this planet is that we have an amazing amount of belief systems that are not ours, that we incorporate as ours. And to find out what we really believe, what we really feel, what we really think, that becomes the opportunity before us to uncover the freedom that already exists, that we've just layered upon layer with belief systems, you know, as kind of a catch-all phrase. Mm-hmm. So that's why I very clearly chose freedom as the beginning point, as one of the aspects of love, because if we can understand that we are innately free, we are, in essence, expanding greater unconditional love for ourselves and for those around us, because the more we free ourselves, the more freedom we will naturally give to those around us, because we understand that everyone's having a very similar experience. Everyone is conditioned in their own way. And if we can free ourselves, we're going to be more apt to give other people their freedom to explore themselves their own way.
So how do you relate that to freedom in the sort of political sense, so where we say democracy means freedom, where I mean, together with freedom, you have rights and power and authority, but there's also the other side of the coin, which is responsibility, isn't it, and duty and obligation. So isn't it the case that with freedom comes a sense of responsibility as well, to behave in a way that's responsible and respectful and service others?
Well, what you're describing is again that very innate freedom that we've been conditioned to understand. The freedom that you speak of when it comes for the political arena, the moral arena, the you know, whatever religious traditions, all those types of aspects of freedom, when rightly looked at, you know, we're really stepping back and looking and observing the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Those ideals held within those contexts are really suggestions and notions, predetermined obligations, predetermined traditions. All of those types of freedom in that very mundane human aspect, that's a construct that people have collectively agreed upon. Mm-hmm. What we're speaking of here is our innate freedom, that genuine innate freedom that every one of us on this planet have from birth, is that we do have the ability to think and feel differently. Now, taken from the perspective of unconditional love, again, you know, we're isolating the single notion of freedom here, but let's, you know, add to this at the moment, the bigger picture of unconditional love, is that when we are coming from our heart, when we're coming from that true space of our creative nature, there is going to be a natural state of knowing, responsibility, understanding, self-love, self-wisdom. We're not necessarily, and those experiences, and when we're truly coming from our heart, we are doing something for ourselves and for those around us with harm to none. It's something that would happen naturally, and we wouldn't do anything in the idea of unconditional love to knowingly harm ourselves or another. So there's, from the heart standpoint, again, we're taking an isolated concept. So in this particular discussion, there's a bigger picture going on. There's innate responsibility, and truly what I feel is that our real responsibility could be said that we are here to understand ourselves and our relationship to those around us. Very different than following the bandwagon or the lead of others. You know, there's some wonderful creatively talented people who have followed the suggestions of others and are in, say, jobs, careers and activities that really bring no joy to their heart, but they followed what they thought they were supposed to do. They may have been brilliant at something else, and yet they didn't have the understanding, the wisdom, the courage, or the training really to follow their heart. And what would that do differently? In a way, and again, some will take this as a utopian ideal, which it certainly isn't meant to be, because there's a natural, practical aspect. That when we all come from our heart, we all work in harmony. When we all come from our heart, we all naturally are sovereign. We are all self-governing. The idea of having, a political structure becomes kind of a moot point at some point in our evolution, in our consciousness. If we look at things right now at this particular point on our planet, I can see where this idea of freedom could be, truly laughed at, because it's taken in context with exactly how you started out. What about the political scenario? What about all these other ways that we are told freedom, is our democratic right? We're not really understanding that deeper essence, and that's really the reason why I chose to take out 63 of the qualities of love, so that we could more focus on them individually as part of a whole. And they really do need to be taken as part of a whole. They are not meant to be isolated and stayed isolated, because they are part of a bigger picture.
Right. So regardless of the political aspect of it, freedom is something which goes hand in hand with other qualities, such as responsibility, for example.
And certainly we have seen, countless evidence, even in our past century, of some beautiful souls who have chosen to come from a point of freedom from self, freedom from regimes, political, whatever, and they have created enormous evolutionary change because they chose to step out of that beat that was the collective and said there's got to be more. They went exploring freedom, and in many instances created freedom not only for themselves but for entire cultures. So there's a frame of reference where they were coming from their heart. They were choosing to be very courageous with enormous self-strength to go out and do something different. And in fact, right now we're seeing, another wave of tremendous strength coming from the collective, where people are saying, what we have been told is freedom. How to think, how to feel, how to operate, what's right, what's wrong, is not freedom. Freedom is being able to come from our heart and be creative. And again, in my context, in my understanding, my experience of the last couple of decades, when we really are coming from our heart, we are coming with harm to none. We are simply adding to a greater collective. So it's kind of like if you're looking at the vibrational quality of the collective as it has been, and try to say that, here's where we can go, the older energy doesn't necessarily have the frame of reference of the bigger picture. And what I'm suggesting here, let's look at that bigger picture while we're looking at the individual components.
So hence the value of looking at these different aspects in their own right, separately from any other aspect that they do naturally go hand in hand with.
It's to help our understanding, because if you think about our linear pathway and our daily walk through life, we are very habit and routine oriented, and so there are a lot of things that we experience over and over again, and we become somewhat shrouded in our own way from the bigger picture, because we're so busy doing our habits that we rarely stop to take a moment and say, what's this in relationship to that? And when we're doing somewhat of a self-awareness, self-understanding, it is extraordinarily helpful to take time out and look at a particular aspect in relationship to the whole, so that we can understand what is natural and is the interconnectedness of all of this. Everything is interconnected and interrelated. And certainly if we can begin to accept the fact that we have power within our own world to make change within our own perspective, again, back to those thoughts and feelings, there is extraordinary freedom in that. And freedom in that would be, as we've termed earlier about the unconditional love, the explanation of unconditional love, it's without limit, without condition. If we start looking at life from a heart-based centered position and start looking at everything with potential and opportunity, that's very different than if we look at everything with kind of a singular focus of fear and doubt and a much narrower pathway. When we feel we have opportunity, when we feel we have freedom to make choice, we have a very different experience. And certainly we've read accounts and stories of, say, people who have been caught up in political experiences, say, where they have been jailed and perhaps even eventually killed off. The political accounts are there were people who were in these situations who found enormous freedom while being jailed because they recognized that that wasn't who they were. They were still free to think and feel differently. So perhaps, you know, in those cases, they really gave us all a gift in showing how freedom exists under all circumstances if we would allow freedom to be part of our consciousness.
So this is why it helps to look at freedom in isolation of anything else, and perhaps higher degrees of freedom than we would normally experience or even have any kind of awareness of, and so that we can see how freedom potentially can lift us out of a huge amount of the kind of stuff that most of us have lived in, and the way that societies generally work today. If we see freedom as something that can come from the heart and also can be experienced in a more to a higher degree, we find that there's something there which has more of the qualities of love associated with it.
And if we give ourselves freedom, in other words, if we allow ourselves the freedom to think differently than we have thought in the past, then we allow new creative ideas, new creative solutions where before we didn't have any. Because again, we become, just as we're habitualized in our outer routine, we can be extraordinarily habitualized in our thinking process, much less even noticing any feelings that are often the ruling responses, the reactions that we have that happen much quicker than any thought comes to mind. You know, feeling being, say, if we generically feel angry, we react very quickly in anger long before we have a thought of anger or even recognize it. That's how the feeling nature works. This is about, again, in the bigger picture, we're looking at the aspect of what if we gave ourselves the freedom to think for ourselves. And of course, coming from a heart center, we're not talking about a mental creation of thought where we stay totally mental and we look to somehow benefit above everyone else or through everyone else. This is something that's part of, like, our heart is connected to everyone's heart. And if I truly honor myself, if I truly get to know myself, know thyself, through and through, I will understand my natural relationship with everyone around me. And if I give myself freedom, I'm going to be much more apt to give others around me freedom, because I will recognize their innate potential to think differently. And if we keep expanding upon that, we keep giving one another the freedom to do the things that we feel come from our heart, we all will work as a very different collective in harmony and in a greater sense of natural joy. Right now, everything is designed to condition us to believe this is the only way, say, freedom can look or act. And, you know, people are feeling quite oppressed, which, you know, the oppression is really coming from their own perspectives of buying into this collective tradition. And many of these things can go back, you know, decades and centuries and even longer. And what I'm saying here is that we have the opportunity to think fresh. We have an opportunity to think new. You know, we have the opportunity to do things that are for greater good, because we recognize we're part of that greater good.
So would you suggest cultivating the experience of freedom, the feeling of freedom in your heart?
Yes, and as I said, you know, the great place, the practical place to start is to begin to recognize that not all the thoughts and feelings that we have are necessarily how we really perceive life. In other words, we have just been so wonderfully conditioned, from a very early age, from so many great teachers, who many of which did have, seemingly, our best interest at heart, and yet they were still coming from their own filters, from their own conditioning, and passing it along, and very few have had the wisdom to allow the natural expression and the natural, expansion of one's innate talents. I mean, we've all got incredible talents and strengths and gifts and creativity, and yet few of us tap into it. So the place to begin is to simply start to focus or contemplate or meditate or just consider the idea that maybe freedom's possible. Hence, why it's the first aspect. Because if we allow the option that it could be possible, then over time we will begin to incorporate greater freedom in our own thinking, our own feeling, and we will learn to trust our heart, we will learn to trust our own strength and our own ability, and we will begin to do things very differently. Certainly that has happened in my life, in extraordinary ways many times. And what I do today has nothing to do with what I thought I was going to be doing early on in my life. In fact, what I was doing early in my life, because there was a point in which I gave myself the freedom to explore a completely different aspect of myself than I'd ever considered. And for the past 2 decades, I've been doing things extraordinarily different than I could have ever conceived of under the old way of thinking, where I didn't give myself the freedom to even explore possibilities in my life. The freedom is that beginning point, because without allowing ourselves to have some semblance of freedom to even consider possibilities, then we will continue on a very habitual path of the old thinking and the old way of doing things.
So in relation to love, then giving oneself freedom is an act of self-love, yes?
Absolutely. Because in fact, we're really honoring ourselves, which is a credible gift to ourselves. And again, what we give to ourselves, we automatically give to those around us. As we're giving ourselves this gift, we will naturally give this gift to others. So it is truly an act of self-love, unconditional love, and an expression of unconditional love to those around us.
Yeah, okay. All right. I think that's pretty clear. Thanks, Harold. Thank you.
Sure.